In the span of a single afternoon, the grand sweeping corridors of Clarence House suddenly felt less like a permanent royal fortress and more like a luxury hotel with a fast-approaching checkout date. What Camilla just realized behind closed doors, staring at a stack of seemingly mundane financial audits delivered by royal couriers, is that the sprawling British Empire she believed she co-governed is legally, structurally, and entirely owned by her stepson. It was a visual and psychological humiliation executed through pure accounting, a jarring, cold-blooded reminder that while she may share the king's bed and wear the sovereign's crown, she is nothing more than a temporary tenant in a multi-billion-dollar estate. The invisible but ironclad wall of the Duchy of Cornwall had just dropped. Between her and the endless royal wealth she assumed was hers to command, leaving her completely exposed to the terrifying reality of her true financial standing. This is the story of a bloodless financial coup, a masterclass in the weaponization of real estate protocol and institutional accounting designed to permanently halt Camilla's final, most desperate power grab. By the end of this video, you will understand the exact mechanics of the secret financial maneuvers she attempted to pull off as King Charles navigated his severe health crisis, how Prince William intercepted the paper trail through his absolute control of the Duchy of Cornwall, and the silent, ruthless retaliation that effectively froze her out of the family's core wealth. This is a forensic look at the devastating moment Camilla realized that the vast properties and unlimited budgets she enjoys are merely a temporary illusion, and that the institution is already auditing her inevitable exit, systematically preserving the financial heritage of the crown for the rightful bloodline. To grasp the sheer scale of the shock that reverberated through her private office this week, one must first look at the towering illusion of absolute ownership Camilla had spent the last 3 decades constructing. For 30 years, her journey was defined by an unparalleled patient calculation, moving methodically from the vilified outsider to the anointed Queen Consort. She had successfully navigated the moral outrage of a nation systematically erased the lingering institutional presence of Princess Diana, and reshaped the king's inner circle to ensure her total administrative dominance. In the minds of her inner circle, her coronation was not just a romantic victory, it was a permanent financial and geographic conquest. She operated with the quiet, unshakable confidence of a woman who believed that King Charles's absolute psychological reliance on her translated directly into untouchable lifelong institutional equity. In the years leading up to this summer, that sense of untouchable geographic security had reached its absolute zenith. Camilla treated the royal residences not as state assets, but as personal fiefdoms. Clarence House was her undisputed operational headquarters, while Highgrove, the beloved country estate historically intertwined with Charles and Diana's early marriage, had been thoroughly colonized by her personal tastes and her family's constant presence. She assumed that this temporary borrowed authority granted her permanent real estate power. She truly believed that the sheer momentum of her reign combined with her husband's devotion would force the institution to look the other way, as she quietly began to test the boundaries of the royal purse, probing for ways to move fiercely protected funding into a gray area of personal indefinite use for her own staff and lifestyle. But that supreme confidence ultimately collided with the cold, unforgiving reality of British constitutional wealth. The trigger for this quiet warfare was a hidden, highly strategic maneuver involving the deeply complex financial architecture of the monarchy. Utilizing the administrative haze of a transitioning court and the king's reduced oversight due to his medical treatments, Camilla attempted to orchestrate a profound breach of protocol. She directed her financial team to file internal paperwork that would secure unprecedented, long-term operational budgets for her private office, deliberately attempting to bypass the standard sovereign grant limitations. It was a calculated attempt to lock in commercial security, seeking guaranteed independent funding and extended lease agreements that would protect her operation long after the inevitable transition of the crown. Camilla was rushing to weaponize her temporary absolute power to secure a permanent financial fortress before the clock ran out. By attempting to draw long-term commitments from the Duchy of Cornwall's revenues, she sought to establish a precedent of independent wealth, normalizing her office's access to the very DNA of the British Crown's private income. She wanted to ensure that no matter what happened to the king, she would never be reduced to the humiliating status of a financially dependent widow begging for an allowance from her stepson. What Camilla failed to account for, however, was the cold, unblinking vigilance of the true landlord of the royal estates, Prince William. As the Prince of Wales and the Duke of Cornwall, William possesses absolute, undisputed executive control over the Duchy of Cornwall, the billion-dollar real estate and investment portfolio that funds the public, charitable and private activities of the heir to the throne. This also means crucially that William is legally the landlord of Highgrove House. When the unprecedented financial requisition forms and long-term funding proposals landed on the desks of the Duchy's auditors, they were immediately flagged. William's financial team uncovered the digital paper trail. They saw the quiet adjustments to projected budgets, the unauthorized attempts to reclassify future state funding as guaranteed personal allowances, and the deliberate circumvention of the stringent financial protocols established to protect the heir's estate. For William, this was not a simple matter of a budget dispute. It was a staggering exploitation of a vulnerable king's authority and a direct threat to the financial integrity of his future reign. The moral outrage within the prince's camp was profound, driven by the commercial desperation that clearly underpinned Camilla's maneuver. William recognized that allowing the Queen Consort to siphon guaranteed future funds from the Duchy would signal a dilution of his own executive power, transforming a highly regulated institutional portfolio into a slush fund for a retiring queen. The response from the true power center of the palace would not involve shouting matches, family interventions, or leaked tabloid tirades. Instead, it would be an exercise in the silent, ruthless deployment of accounting and administrative power, designed to humiliate through pure bureaucratic efficiency. On a quiet Tuesday morning, the trap snapped shut with devastating administrative precision. When Camilla's senior financial secretary opened the heavily anticipated response from the Duchy of Cornwall, expecting the customary rubber stamp approval for the Queen's extended budget requests, they were met with a flat, unequivocal denial. The entire financial protocol had been strictly enforced without a single inch of compromise. The official audit returned to Camilla's office clearly stated that all future financial and estate planning regarding Clarence House and Highgrove would strictly follow the traditional bare minimum protocol for a dowager queen. There would be no independent executive funding, no guaranteed long-term leases on Duchy properties, and a clear mandated timeline for the eventual vacating of primary royal residences. That detail matters immensely because, in the hyper-symbolic world of the British monarchy, financial independence is the physical manifestation of power. To be denied access to the Duchy's future revenues and reminded of her impending eviction is a public strip mining of status, a nonverbal declaration that the institution views her as a temporary line item, not a permanent stakeholder. Sitting at her antique desk in Clarence House, reading the cold financial reality printed on the heavy royal letterhead, the psychological weight of this institutional retaliation settled heavily over the Queen. She was trapped in the ultimate contradiction, sitting at the absolute pinnacle of social prestige, married to the most powerful man in the country, yet entirely locked out of the very wealth she believed she commanded. As the silence filled the room, the terrifying realization washed over her that the eviction clock had already started ticking, and Prince William was holding the only key. The immediate aftermath of reading that financial audit was not a quiet acceptance of defeat, but a desperate, calculated escalation. Camilla is a survivor who has spent decades outmaneuvering the British press and the palace establishment, and she was not about to let a ledger dictate her future without a fight. Gathering the heavily stamped rejection documents, she bypassed her private secretaries and took the issue directly to the king's private study. She presented the audit not merely as an administrative slight against her office, but as a direct, insolent challenge to the sovereign's ultimate authority. She fully expected King Charles, the man who had torn the royal family apart, to legitimize her position. To immediately summon the Chancellor of the Duchy, issue a royal mandate, and forcefully overrule the Prince of Wales. Instead, she was met with a profound, insurmountable silence. The king slowly reviewed the paperwork, looked at his wife, and said absolutely nothing. It was not a silence born of confusion, but of a devastating constitutional reality. Having managed the Duchy of Cornwall himself for over 50 years, Charles knew better than anyone that William was acting entirely within his airtight legal rights. The duchy belongs exclusively to the heir to the throne, operating independently of the crown estate, and the sovereign's direct interference. More importantly, facing the grueling reality of his medical treatments and a fading tenure, the king possessed neither the physical energy nor the political capital to wage a constitutional real estate war against his fiercely popular son. By looking away and refusing to intervene, Charles silently surrendered. In that agonizing moment, he effectively handed the keys to the kingdom over to William, leaving Camilla completely defenseless against the cold bureaucratic machinery of her stepson. To fully understand the gravity of this silent betrayal, one must unpack the terrifying commercial desperation that immediately gripped Camilla's inner circle. The British public assumes that the Queen Consort is unfathomably wealthy, a billionaire in her own right, simply by association. The truth is staggeringly different, and William's audit forcefully exposed it. The Windsor wealth is purely institutional, bound by centuries of law to the reigning monarch and the immediate heir. Camilla's entire ecosystem, her elite private secretaries, her public relations managers, the vast logistical support for her non-royal children has been propped up by her proximity to the duchy's endless revenue streams. Without William's signature, that financial lifeline is instantly severed. When Charles eventually passes, Camilla will be relegated to the sovereign grant's absolute baseline for a dowager queen, a fraction of her current operating budget. The sprawling majesty of Highgrove and the operational headquarters of Clarence House will be systematically reclaimed by the Crown. Her only true financial fallback is Ray Mill House, her modest private home in Wiltshire. For a woman who spent 30 years fighting to sit at the absolute center of global wealth and power, the realization that she will be forced to retreat to a private country home, entirely reliant on whatever modest allowance William deems appropriate, is a psychological crushing blow. The Parker Bowles family possesses no royal trust funds, no ancestral estates, and no sovereign leverage. The illusion of their royal dynasty was entirely pierced by a single financial audit. But William's actions were not merely an exercise in financial housekeeping, they were a cold, deliberate eviction notice designed to clear the stage for the true future of the monarchy. For the Prince of Wales, securing the financial borders of the duchy and the royal estates is about aggressively protecting the architecture of Princess Catherine's future court. Over the past year, Catherine has endured the relentless, suffocating pressure of royal life and her own profound health battles with quiet, unbroken dignity. She has never complained, never leaked to the press, and never weaponized her suffering for commercial gain. William is ensuring that when the inevitable transition occurs, his wife will step into a palace structure that is fully funded, fully secured, and completely cleansed of the Parker Bowles faction's lingering influence. By cutting Camilla's long-term financial access, William is declaring that the vast resources of the crown will be dedicated exclusively to the rightful bloodline. The forensic proof of this shifting power dynamic is already surfacing in subtle, highly symbolic administrative updates across the royal estates. In the weeks following the audit denial, Palace insiders noted a quiet but undeniable shift in the management of Highgrove's lucrative public gardens and commercial enterprises. Charitable initiatives and branding efforts that were once heavily championed by Camilla have been subtly realigned, folded back into the broader, more traditional focus of the Prince and Princess of Wales. Even more devastating, certain architectural and decorative features within Duchy properties that were once seen as subtle. Nods to Camilla's influence have been quietly scheduled for historical restoration, a polite aristocratic euphemism for institutional erasure. There is a profound sense that the ghost of Princess Diana, the original Princess of Wales, seems to guide the pen as William systematically reclaims his mother's former country home from the woman who displaced her. Every revoked budget request, every denied lease extension, and every subtle protocol change is a silent execution of a long-delayed revenge. The royal machine is self-correcting, using the unbreakable laws of property and finance to push the outsider back to the periphery. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the antique furnishings of Clarence House, the grand illusion of Camilla's reign finally dissolved. She had spent 30 years playing an incredibly patient, flawless game of chess surviving public hatred and complex palace intrigue, only to discover at the very end that the board itself legally belongs to someone else. She is a temporary occupant of a historic role, married to a fading king, and completely outmaneuvered by an heir who kills with a pen and a ledger. The ultimate tragedy of her lifelong ambition is that she successfully climbed to the absolute pinnacle of the British throne, only to realize in the cold light of an audited spreadsheet that she can never actually own it. If you found this deep analytical look into the shifting financial and power dynamics of the British royal family compelling, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe Prince William is right to use his financial authority to protect the future of the crown and clear the path for Princess Catherine? Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next story.